The one thing I asked for the morning I signed the divorce papers, I did not cry. I sat at the kitchen table in an old gray sweater, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, watching my husband read through the settlement with the kind of relief people usually save for walking out of a hospital. He flipped to the last page and looked up at me. "You are really not asking for anything," he said. "I am asking for one thing," I told him. He frowned, scanning the page again. "Your mother," I said. "I want her to come live with me. My name is Claire Whitman, and that quiet, strange request became the smartest decision I ever made." I met my husband Marcus when I was 24 and he was 32. All easy confidence and charm that required constant feeding to keep believing in. We married 2 years later, and I moved into his house in a suburb 40 minutes from everything that had once been mine, my friends, my old life. All of it left behind for a version of myself I was still trying to figure out how to be. His mother, Eleanor, was the one who told me I did not have to be anyone in particular. She arrived that first Thanksgiving with a homemade pecan pie and a suitcase that listed to one side because she refused on principle to fix the broken wheel. Sharp-eyed, small, white-haired, she sat at my kitchen table, accepted the coffee I offered, and said plainly, "My son gets restless, I am sure you have noticed." I just had not said it out loud yet. Over the following years, she visited 4 or 5 times annually, always remembering small details about me nobody else bothered to notice, always asking real questions and actually listening to the answers. Marcus never once noticed how much I looked forward to those visits, mostly because by then he was quietly occupied elsewhere. I found out about the affair on a gray February afternoon, dropping off a jacket he'd left in my car, when I saw him in the parking garage standing close to a young woman named Justine from his office in that particular way people stand when they believe no one is watching. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, then drove home, made dinner, and said nothing. For the next 2 months, I quietly gathered myself, spoke to a lawyer, opened a savings account in only my name, and confided in nobody except my practical, no-nonsense sister in Portland. I also began calling Eleanor more often, long calls stretching past an hour, though I never mentioned Justine. She was 71, living alone in North Carolina, her knees giving her trouble, too proud to ask for help. One evening, she simply said, "Something is wrong," and when I admitted a lot of things were wrong, she told me plainly, "Then you will figure it out." I held on to those 5 words for a long time. When I finally confronted Marcus, he denied it, then admitted it, then called it complicated, and finally told me Justine was pregnant and that he wanted to marry her. I looked at the man I had shared 7 years with and simply said, "Okay, I want a divorce," and watched relief flood his face so completely I nearly laughed. My lawyer explained my position clearly: 7 years of marriage, my earning power far below his after years spent managing our household instead of my own career, meaning a contested fight would leave me exhausted and worse off. But there was something else weighing on me, something I had been quietly turning over for months. Eleanor's knees had gotten worse. She had taken a small fall she barely mentioned, and I knew exactly what Marcus had planned for her. A nice facility, he called it. The phrase people use when something is convenient for everyone except the person it happens to. So I built a different plan entirely. At the settlement table, I asked for nothing but my old car, my personal belongings, and his mother, along with 3 years of her care expenses while I rebuilt my own footing. My lawyer asked twice if I was certain. I was certain. Marcus read the terms, and I watched pure arithmetic cross his face. The cost of an aging mother in a facility indefinitely versus the cost of handing her off entirely in one clean transaction. He signed without much hesitation. On his way out, he asked why I even wanted her. "Because she is good company," I told him, and walked out the door. I found a small 2-bedroom apartment 40 minutes north of the city, near my childhood town, with a good farmer's market and a community center offering the water aerobics classes Eleanor had always wanted to try. My sister and I drove down to help her move, and she stood in the doorway of the house she'd lived in for 30 years, looked at it a long moment, and said simply, "I have been ready. I was just waiting to be asked." She brought her broken suitcase, a box of her late husband's books, and her pecan pie recipe written on an old note card. By the 3rd evening in our new apartment, she was cooking dinner without being asked, setting the table like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I sat down and cried. Not from hardship, but because something finally felt exactly right. Word trickled back to me through my sister that things were not smooth on the other side of my old marriage. Justine, pregnant and demanding, had firm opinions about money and security, and Marcus was discovering that replacing one marriage with another does not remove friction. It only changes its shape. There had also been financial irregularities in his business I had always sensed but never had proof of, small inconsistencies that never quite fit the picture he presented. His business partner eventually filed a formal complaint. An audit followed, then a second, and the news spread through his professional circle like weather. Justine left him 4 months later, announcing her journey and her truth in a public post my sister forwarded to me. I set my phone down and went to make tea. Eleanor was at the kitchen table doing her crossword in pen, as always. "What happened?" she asked, and when I told her, she set her pen down and asked quietly if he was in real trouble of his own making. "I figured it was coming," she said. "Not the timing, just the direction." "He could have been different," she added. "He had it in him, he just never wanted to do the work." "Some people don't," she said, and picked her pen back up. I asked her plainly if she hated me for the divorce. She looked at me like I had asked something faintly ridiculous. "You were the one who wanted me," she said. "He was going to put me in a facility and write a check. You packed my things and drove 10 hours and cried at my dinner table." That is not a hard calculation. What nobody outside our little household understood about Eleanor was that she was never actually helpless. She had run her own small business for 40 years before retiring, had saved far more than she ever told her son, and had a sharper mind than most people I had met in any decade of my life. 3 months after moving in, she sat me down and told me about her savings, naming a number that made me go very still. "I have been thinking about what to do with it," she said, and when I started to protest that she did not need to think of me, she held up a hand. "I know I do not need to. I want to. You walked away from an entire life to start over, and you took me with you when you did not have to. I want to invest in what you are building." I thought it over for 2 weeks, talked to my sister and a financial advisor, and finally said yes. She put real capital behind the small e-commerce business I had been quietly building on nights and weekends during the last years of my marriage, something that had been entirely mine. Within 18 months, it covered my rent and more. Within 2 years, it was simply what I did for a living. I do not hate Marcus, I want to say that clearly, because I know people expect a cleaner kind of ending. He was selfish and cowardly and ultimately short-sighted, but I lived with him for 7 years, and there is no version of that story where the feeling at the end is entirely simple. What I know is this. I walked out of that marriage with $8,000, a suitcase with a broken wheel that was not even mine, and the most meaningful relationship of the following 4 years of my life. Eleanor is 73 now, her knees finally repaired after the surgery my sister and I convinced her to finally have last spring. She does water aerobics twice a week and has strong opinions about everyone in the class. She has become close friends with my downstairs neighbor, a retired school principal who shares her love of mysteries and her disdain for fussy food. She still makes pecan pie every Thanksgiving and sets the table like it's the easiest thing in the world. Marcus reached out last year, a short, careful email asking if we could talk. I met him for coffee in a neutral place, thinking of it, half joking to myself as a negotiation term, which probably says something about what that marriage trained me to do. He looked like he had been through a great deal, and he apologized in the heavy, genuine way that means someone has finally understood the full shape of what they did. I believed him. It changed nothing, but I believed him. "Is my mother doing okay?" he asked quietly. "She is doing better than okay," I told him, and something moved across his face I recognized. The specific grief of realizing you let go of something good simply because you were too distracted to see what you had. On the drive home, I called her. She picked up on the second ring, already mid-complaint about a neighbor bringing store-bought muffins to water aerobics again, delivering it with the exact tone of someone describing a minor crime. I told her I would put the kettle on, that she should tell me everything when she got home. And driving through the early evening light, I realized I was already looking forward to it. The tea, the stories, the small ordinary warmth of a life I had built for both of us. Out of the one thing I had asked for when everything else fell apart. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments which moment hit you the hardest, and tell me where you are watching from tonight. This has been another story from the Revenge Tales. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.